Welcome to study session 10. The concept of heredity. Introduction. Growth and development are the result of the interaction of the influences of heredity, environment, maturation, and learning. However, the subject of heredity will be examined in this session. In this study session, you will be introduced to the meaning of heredity and the influence on the behavior of man. Learning outcomes. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. Explain the meaning of heredity, and 2. Highlight the influence on the behavior of man. Meaning of heredity. The sum of all biological processes by which particular characteristics are transmitted from parents to their offspring is called heredity. It refers to the transmission of potentialities or traits of physical, mental, and other characteristics from parents to offspring at conception. Nature of the individual's makeup as contained in the genes. Children of the same parents may be tall or short or thin, dark in complexion or light, clever or dull, extroverted or introverted. All these are due to the influence of heredity. Heredity is the passing of traits from parents to their offspring, either through asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction. This is the process by which an offspring cell or organism acquires or becomes predisposed to the characteristics of its parent cell or organism. Through heredity, variations exhibited by individuals can accumulate and cause some species to evolve through the natural selection of specific phenotype traits. The study of heredity in biology is called genetics, which includes the field of epigenetics. In humans, eye color is an example of an inherited characteristic. An individual might inherit the brown eye trait from one of the parents. Inherited traits are controlled by genes, and the complete set of genes within an organism's genome is called its genotype. Types of heredity. There are two types of heredity, which are dominant and recessive alleles. An allele is said to be dominant if it is always expressed in the appearance of an organism, phenotype, provided that at least one copy of it is present. For example, in peas, the allele for green pods, G, is dominant to that for yellow. Thus, pea plants with a pair of alleles, either GG homozygote or GG heterozygote, will have green pods. The allele for yellow pods is recessive. The effect of these alleles are only seen when it is present in both chromosomes, GG homozygote. The description of a mode of biological inheritance consists of three main categories, which includes the following in the diagram below. 1. Number of involved loci. The number of involved loci consists of the following below. Monogenetic, also called simple one locus. 2. Oligogenetic, few loci. 3. Polygenetic, many loci. Involved chromosomes. The involved chromosomes consist of the following below. Autosomal. Loci are not situated on a sex chromosome. Jonosomal. Loci are situated on the sex chromosome. X chromosomal. Loci are situated on the X chromosome, the more common case. Y chromosomal. Loci are situated on the Y chromosome. Mitochondrial. Loci are situated on the mitochondrial DNA. 3. Correlation genotype phenotype. It consists of the following below. 1. Dominant. 2. Intermediate, also called codominant. 3. Recessive. 4. Overdominant. 5. Underdominant. These three categories are part of every exact description of a mode of inheritance in the above order. In addition, more specifications may be added as follows. 4. Coincidental and environmental interactions. Penetrance. 1. Complete. 2. Incomplete. Expressivity. 1. Invariable. 2. Variable. Heritability. In polygenic. Take 2. Heritability in polygenetic and sometimes also in oligogenetic modes of inheritance. Maternal or paternal imprinting phenomena. 5. Sex-linked interactions. This consists of the following below. Sex-linked inheritance, genosomal loci. 2. Sex-limited phenotype expression. 3. Inheritance through the maternal line in case of mitochondrial DNA loci. 4. Inheritance through the paternal line in case of Y chromosomal loci. 6. Locus-locus interactions. This consists of the following below. 1. Epistasis with other loci, for example overdominance. 2. Gene coupling with other loci. 3. Homozygous lethal factors. 4. Semi-lethal factors. Determination and description of a mode of inheritance is achieved primarily through statistical analysis of pedigree data. In case the involved loci are known, methods of molecular genetics can also be employed. Transmission of heredity characteristics. The nature of the makeup of an individual is contained in the genes. The reproductive cells contain the hereditary materials of live chromosomes and DNA molecules, that is, deoxyribonucleic acid. The DNA molecules of the nucleus direct all chemical reactions, metabolism that go on in the cell. Genetic factors often manifest themselves in the characteristics like height, colors, intelligence, aggressive behavior. Definition of terms. Genes. These are units of material of inheritance located on the chromosomes, which contain information for expression and characteristics which are passed from parents to offspring to the gametes and which influence every aspect of the organism of the later. Chromosomes. These are structures found in the nuclei or cell arranged in pairs during cell division and carriers of hereditary factors or character genes. Genes control developmental process. Note: genes may be recessive or dominant. Recessive gene. This is a character which does not produce its effect in the presence of the dominant character. For example, TT combination. T is a recessive gene. Dominant gene. The character that produces its effect even though the opposite or contrasting character is present. For example, in TT, T is the dominant gene over T. Phenotype. This is the physical expression of observable characteristic of an organism. Genotype. This is composed of the genetic characteristic or genetic makeup inherited from both parents. The complete set of observable traits of the structure and behavior of an organism is called its phenotype. These traits arise from the interaction of its genotype with the environment. As a result, many aspects of an organism's phenotype are not inherited. For example, sun-tanned skin comes from the interaction between a person's phenotype and sunlight. Thus, suntans are not passed on to people's children. However, some people tan more easily than others due to differences in their genotype. A striking example is people with the inherited trait of albinism, who do not tan at all and are very sensitive to sunburn. Heritable traits are known to be passed from one generation to the next via DNA, a molecule that encodes genetic information. DNA is a long polymer that incorporates 4 types of bases which are interchangeable. The sequence of bases along a particular DNA molecule specifies the genetic information. This is comparable to a sequence of letters spelling out a passage of text. Before a cell divides through mitosis, the DNA is copied so that each of the resulting 2 cells will inherit the DNA sequence. A portion of a DNA molecule that specifies a single functional unit is called a gene. Different genes have different sequence of bases. Within cells, the long strand of DNA form condensed structures called chromosomes. Organisms inherit genetic material from their parents in the form of homologous chromosomes containing a unique combination of DNA sequences that code for genes. The specific location of a DNA sequence within a chromosome is known as a locus. If the DNA sequence at a particular locus varies between individuals, the different forms of this sequence are called alleles. DNA sequences can change through mutations, producing new alleles. If a mutation occurs within a gene, the new allele may affect the trait that the gene controls, altering the phenotype of the organism. However, while this simple correspondence between an allele and a trait works in some cases, most traits are more complex and are controlled by multiple interacting genes within and among organisms. Developmental biologists suggest that complex interactions in genetic networks and communication among cells can lead to heritable variations that may underlie some of the mechanics in developmental plasticity and canalization. Recent findings have confirmed important examples of heritable changes that cannot be explained by direct agency of the DNA molecule. These phenomena are classed as epigenetic inheritance systems that are causally or independently evolving over genes. Research into modes and mechanisms of epigenetic influence is still in its scientific infancy. However, this area of research has attracted much recent activity as it broadens the scope of heritability and evolutionary biology in general. DNA methylation marking chromatin, self-sustaining metabolic loops, gene silencing by RNA interference, and a three-dimensional conformation of proteins such as prions are areas where epigenetic inheritance systems have been discovered at the organismic level. Heritability may also occur at even larger scales. For example, ecological inheritance through the process of niche construction is defined as the regular and repeated activities of organisms in their environment. This generates a legacy of effects that modifies and fits back into the selection regime of subsequent generations. Descendants inherit genes plus environmental characteristics generated by the ecological actions of ancestors. Other examples of heritability in evolution that are not under the direct control of genes include inheritance of cultural traits, group heritability, and symbiogenesis. These examples of heritability that operate above the gene are covered broadly under the title of multi-level or hierarchical selection, which has been a subject of intense debate in the history of evolutionary science. When Charles Darwin proposed his theory of evolution in 1859, one of its major problems was the lack of an underlying mechanism for heredity. Darwin believed in a mix of blending inheritance and the inheritance of acquired traits, pangenesis. Blending inheritance would lead to uniformity across populations in only a few generations and then will remove variation from a population on which natural selection could act. This led to Darwin adopting some Lamarckian ideas in later editions of On the Origin of Species and his later biological works. Darwin's primary approach to heredity was to outline how it appeared to work, noticing that traits that were not expressed explicitly in the parent at the time of reproduction could be inherited, that certain traits could be sex-linked, and so on, rather than suggesting mechanisms. Darwin's initial model of heredity was adopted by and then heavily modified by his cousin Francis Galton, who laid the framework for the biometric school of heredity. Galton found no evidence to support the aspects of Darwin's pangenesis model, which relied on acquired traits. The inheritance of acquired traits was shown to have little basis in the 1880s when August Weismann cut the tails of many generations of mice and found that their offspring continued to develop tails. The influence of the behavior on man. Man's behavior can be influenced by the following below. 1. Culture. 2. Personality. 3. Level of analysis. 4. Indigenous cultural and cross-cultural psychologies. Culture. The conceptualization of culture is by no means a simple matter. One possible way to think about culture is that culture is to society what memory is to individuals. It includes what has worked in the experience of a society so that it was worth transmitting to future generations. Sperber, 1996, used the analogy of an epidemic. A useful idea, for example, how to make a tool, is passed by more and more people and becomes an element of culture. Bacalov and others in 1992 distinguished three kinds of culture: metaculture, evoked culture, and epidemiological culture. They argue that psychology underlies culture and society, and biological evolution underlies psychology. The biology has been common to all humans as a species, distinguishable from other species, result in a metaculture that corresponds to pan-human mental contents and organization. Biology in different ecologies results in evoked culture. For example, hot climate leads to light clothing, which reflects domain-specific mechanisms that are triggered by local circumstances and leads to within-group similarities and between-groups differences. What Sperber describes, Bacalov and others call epidemiological culture. Elements of culture. 1. Shared standard operating procedures. 2. Unstated assumptions. 3. Tools. 4. Norms. 5. Values. 6. Habits about sampling the environment. Because perception and cognition depend on the information that is sampled from the environment and are fundamental psychological processes, this cultural influenced sampling of information is of particular interest to psychologists. Cultures develop conventions for sampling information and determine how much to weigh the sampled elements from the environment. For example, people in hierarchical cultures are more likely to sample clues about hierarchy than clues about aesthetics. Personality. Fonda, 1997, defined personality as an individual's characteristic pattern of thought, emotion, and behavior, together with psychological mechanisms, hidden or not, behind these patterns. Characteristic sampling of the information in the environment, which corresponds to the sampling that occurs in different cultures, can be one of the bases of individual differences in personality. Personality may also be conceptualized as a configuration of cognitions, emotions, and habits activated when situations stimulate their expression. Generally, they determine the individual's unique adjustment to the world. This view is supported by data that indicate the importance of the situation. Summary of study session. 1. The sum of all biological processes by which particular characteristics are transmitted from parents to their offspring is called heredity. 2. Heredity is the passing of traits from parents to their offspring, either through asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction. 3. The nature of the makeup of an individual is contained in the genes. The reproductive cells contain the hereditary materials of live chromosomes and DNA molecules. 4. Genes. These are units of materials of inheritance located in the chromosomes which contain information for expression of characteristics which are passed from parents to offspring through the gametes and which influence every aspect of the organisms of the latter. 5. The conceptualization of culture is by no means a simple matter. One possible way to think about culture is that culture is to society what memory is to individuals. 6. Personality may also be conceptualized as a configuration of cognitions, emotions, and habits activated when situations stimulate their expression. We have come to the end of study session 9. Thanks for listening.